They say a man's home is his castle. But they never tell you what to do when the people you love let a barbarian through the front gate. My name is Gary. I am 36 years old, and I spent 15 years in heavy construction learning how to stabilize skyscrapers. But I couldn't even keep my own living room from collapsing. I bought this house in Jersey with blood, sweat, and 15-hour shifts, thinking it would be a sanctuary. Instead, I ended up paying a $600 electric bill for the privilege of being a stranger in my own kitchen. I didn't lose my home to a bank or a natural disaster. I lost it to a family favor that turned into a legal nightmare. But here's the thing about builders. We know exactly when a structure is too rotten to save. And when I realized my girlfriend and her brother were just two parasites sharing one plan, I stopped being the nice guy provider. I became the architect of their eviction. I am 36 years old, and I've spent the better part of my life building things that are meant to last. I'm a site super for a commercial firm in North Jersey. I deal with structural steel, blueprints, and deadlines that would make most people's heads spin. I know exactly what it takes to build a foundation that won't crack under pressure. 5 years ago, I put every cent of my savings into a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet corner of Bergen County. It was my trophy. My I made it moment. I remember the smell of the fresh paint and the way the sunlight hit the hardwood floors in the morning. It was mine. Every mortgage payment, every property tax hike, every shingle I replaced, I paid for it with the sweat of my brow and 15-hour shifts in the freezing rain. But lately, walking through my front door feels like trespassing. I come home at 7 o'clock p.m., covered in drywall dust and bone-tired. And the first thing I smell isn't home. It's the greasy scent of cheap pepperoni pizza and the stale air of a house that hasn't seen a vacuum in a month. I look at the walls I painted myself, now scuffed by the heels of a guy who doesn't even know what a mortgage interest rate looks like. The silence I worked so hard to afford has been replaced by the frantic clicking of a gaming mouse and the muffled shouts of a 30-year-old man arguing with teenagers on Discord. I built this life to be a sanctuary, a masterpiece of stability. But as I stand in my own kitchen, realizing I'm out of coffee, because someone else drank it all while I was at work, I can feel the foundation of my own life starting to shift. I didn't realize it yet, but the family favor I agreed to 4 months ago was a wrecking ball aimed straight at my front door. I should have seen it coming. In construction, if a subcontractor asks for just a few days to catch up, you know you're looking at a 2-week delay. But Jessica, she was my blind spot. We'd been together for 3 years, and I genuinely thought we were the endgame. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in October. I found her sitting at the kitchen island, eyes puffy, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even wait for me to take off my work boots. "It's Tyler," she whispered, her voice cracking in that specific way that usually makes me want to fix the world for her. "He lost the Austin gig. The tech market is a bloodbath, Gary. He's got nowhere to go. His landlord in Texas already has a new tenant lined up." She didn't ask. She pleaded. She painted a picture of her little brother, a 30-year-old man sleeping in his car on I-35. "Just a month," she promised, clutching my hand. "2 tops. Just until he gets his feet under him and finds a new remote role." "His family, Gary. Please." I looked at the empty guest room, the one I planned to turn into a home office, or maybe eventually a nursery. My gut told me that mixing family with my sanctuary was like pouring sugar into a gas tank. But I loved her. I wanted to be the good guy, the stable provider she could lean on. So I gave her the nod. 1 month, I said. He needs to be looking for work every single day. The soft landing happened 48 hours later. Tyler rolled up in a beat-up sedan packed with gaming monitors and boxes of graphic novels. There was no thank you. "No, I appreciate you opening your home. Just a hey man, where's the Wi-Fi router? I need the high-speed pod within a week." The temporary guest had unpacked like he was planning to stay until the next census. The guest room didn't just become his bedroom. It became a bunker. And Jessica, the tears were gone, replaced by a defensive wall. Whenever I'd ask how the job hunt was going, she'd snap that I was pressuring him and that the market is tough. The month passed. Then the holidays. By January, Tyler wasn't a guest anymore. He was a permanent, rent-free fixture. And I was just the guy who paid the property taxes for the privilege of being ignored in my own hallway. By February, my living room had been officially annexed. I'd spent $4,000 on a top green Italian leather sectional, a piece of furniture that was supposed to be my reward for a decade of overtime. Now, it was Tyler's command center, Every day was a carbon copy of the one before. I'd head out at 5 o'clock a.m., the house quiet and freezing because I was trying to keep the utility costs down. When I'd return 14 hours later, the scene was grim. Tyler would be sprawled out, surrounded by a fortress of empty Mountain Dew bottles and grease-stained Chick-fil-A bags. The blue light from the 75-inch TV, my TV would be flickering against his face as he screamed into a headset about lag and noobs. The job hunt. It was a ghost. I checked the browser history on the shared computer, occasionally nothing but Reddit, Twitch, and how to level up fast in Elden Ring. No LinkedIn. No Indeed. No emails from recruiters. But it wasn't just the laziness. It was the sheer, casual disrespect for the math of my life. My grocery bill had spiked by 40%. My high-speed fiber internet, which I need for uploading site blueprints, was constantly throttled because he was streaming 4,000 gameplay all day. I'd find my expensive kitchen knives, the ones I specifically asked him not to touch, sitting in the sink, covered in dried peanut butter. I'd try to bring it up. Hey, Tyler, any leads on those sales roles? He wouldn't even hit pause. Market's still dry, Gary. Don't be a corporate shill, man. I'm networking in the Discord groups. It's about connections now. Then Jessica would chime in from the kitchen, her voice sharp with a protective edge I no longer understood. Leave him alone, Gary. He's depressed. Do you want him to end up on the street just because he's having a hard time? It was a pincer move. Every time I tried to reclaim a square inch of my own property, they'd team up to make me feel like a heartless landlord. I was the one working, the one paying, and yet, somehow, I was the villain for wanting to sit on my own couch without sticking to a spilled soda stain. I was a stranger in a house I was still building, watching my investment be treated like a subsidized dorm room. The breaking point didn't come from a grand betrayal. It came from a wall-mounted piece of plastic. It was mid-February, one of those Jersey nights where the wind of the Atlantic cuts through your jacket like a serrated knife. I'd spent 12 hours on a site in Hoboken, standing in slush and mud, dealing with a concrete pour that went south. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my bones felt like they were made of ice. All I wanted was a hot shower and a house set to a crisp, breathable 68 degrees. I stepped inside, and it hit me a wall of thick, suffocating heat. It was like walking into a tropical greenhouse. I checked the Nest thermostat. 82 degrees. Tyler was in the living room, of course. He was wearing gym shorts and a tank top, leaning back on my sectional with a controller in his hand. A single bead of sweat was rolling down his temple, but he looked perfectly content. Tyler, it's a furnace in here, I said, my voice heavy with a fatigue that went deeper than my muscles. I walked over and dialed the temp down. The AC kicked on almost immediately, a low hum of sanity returning to the building. Tyler actually paused his game. He turned his head slowly, looking at me with a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Jude, what are you doing? I had it set there for a reason. I was feeling a chill. A chill? I snapped. It's 82 degrees. I'm not paying public service electric and gas an extra $300 a month so you can pretend you're in Miami while it's snowing outside. If you're cold, put on a hoodie. He stood up then, puffing out his chest, trying to use his height to intimidate me in my own hallway. He didn't look guilty. He looked offended. Then he said the words that will be burned into my brain until the day I die. Look, man, you need to chill out. You're a guest here too, in a way. This is my sister's place, and she likes it warm. You need to start respecting the rules of her house. The world went quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face. Her house? I whispered. Tyler, I bought this place 5 years before I even met Jessica. My name is the only one on the deed. My signature is the only one on the mortgage. Yeah, well, he sneered, turning back to the TV. She's the one who makes it a home. You just work here. Don't be a dick about the thermostat in her house. In that moment, the nice guy who had been subsidizing this guy's life for months died. I didn't yell. I didn't throw him out that second. I just stood there, staring at the back of his head, realizing that I wasn't dealing with a guest anymore. I was dealing with a squatter who had convinced himself he was royalty. The front door creaked open, and Jessica walked in, carrying a bag of groceries that I had undoubtedly paid for. She took one look at the two of us standing in the hallway, me, still in my dust-caked work clothes, and Tyler, vibrating with unearned indignation, and she let out a long, theatrical sigh. What now? She asked, her voice dripping with exhaustion, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. Your brother just informed me that I'm a guest. I said, my voice eerily calm. He told me I need to respect the rules of your house. He's got the thermostat at 82 and thinks I'm the intruder for turning it down. I waited. I waited for her to laugh. I waited for her to turn to Tyler and say, "Are you insane? Gary pays for everything." I waited for the woman I'd spent 3 years with to remind her brother that he was living on my charity. Instead, she just rolled her eyes at me. "Oh my God, Gary, don't be so dramatic," she said, brushing past me to hand Tyler a bag of chips. "He just likes it a little warmer. Why do you always have to pick a fight the second you get home? Just let it go. It's not a big deal." That was the moment. The click. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a sudden, violent clarity, like a structural beam snapping in a high rise. They weren't two separate people anymore. They were a single parasitic unit. Jessica wasn't my partner. She was Tyler's enabler, and I was their landlord who just happened to sleep in the master bedroom. They saw my hard work as a resource, my home as their right, and my boundaries as drama. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her, and realized the woman I loved wouldn't stand by and watch her brother disrespect me in the house I built. The woman standing in front of me was just protecting her golden ticket. "You're right," I said, my voice flat. "My mistake," Tyler smirked, thinking he'd won. Jessica gave me a dismissive nod and headed to the kitchen. They thought I was sulking. They thought I'd just go upstairs, watch some TV, and wake up tomorrow ready to pay the bills again. They were wrong. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is chaotic. What I felt now was precision. I walked upstairs, sat down at my mahogany desk, and opened my laptop. I didn't search for how to fix a relationship. I searched for landlord-tenant law, Bergen County, New York or New Jersey area. I stopped being Gary the boyfriend. I became Gary the architect of their removal. If they wanted to treat this like a legal dispute over rules, fine. I was about to show them the only rulebook that actually mattered. The next morning, I didn't go to the construction site. I called in my foreman, told him I had a structural emergency at home, and drove straight into Newark. I didn't want a family therapist. I wanted a shark. I ended up in the office of a guy named Marcus Thornay, no-nonsense real estate attorney whose office overlooked the Passaic River. He sat behind a desk, piled with eviction filings and foreclosure notices. I told him everything. The deed, the 4 months of Tyler's soft landing, the thermostat incident, and the fact that I hadn't seen a dime of rent or a single chore completed. "I want them out," I said, my voice steady. "Today, I want to change the locks while they're out getting tacos." Thorne leaned back, clicking his pen. "In the state of New Jersey, you do that, Gary, and you'll be the one in handcuffs. Since your girlfriend and her brother have been there for more than 30 days and receive mail there, they aren't guests anymore. In the eyes of the law, they are tenants at will." It felt like a punch to the gut. "So they can just stay forever?" "No," Thorne said, sliding a yellow legal pad toward me. "But we have to play the game by the book. If you try to force them out, they can sue you for illegal eviction. But if we serve them a formal notice to quit, we start a clock they can't stop. It's a 30-day termination of tenancy. It doesn't matter that there's no lease. It doesn't matter that she's your girlfriend. The law treats this as a business arrangement that is now over." He spent the next hour drafting 2 identical documents. These weren't "please move out" letters. They were cold, sterile legal weapons printed on heavy bond paper. The recipient, Tyler Miller and Jessica Vance. The directive, termination of tenancy at will. The deadline, 30 days from the date of service. Once you serve these, Thorne warned, the relationship part of your life is officially dead. There's no coming back from this. You're not a boyfriend anymore. You're a landlord in a hostile takeover. "Good," I said, signing the retainer. "The boyfriend died at 82 degrees last night." I walked out of that office with the 2 envelopes tucked under my arm. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest didn't feel like anxiety. It felt like a plan. I wasn't going to yell, and I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to let the legal machinery of the state of New Jersey do the heavy lifting for me. I waited until Friday night. In my line of work, you don't start a demolition until you've secured the site. I wanted them relaxed. I wanted them to feel untouchable when I walked through the door at 6:30 p.m. The house was, predictably, a swamp. Tyler was in his usual spot on the sectional, his headset around his neck, laughing at something on the screen. Jessica was at the kitchen island, wine glass in hand, scrolling through an iPad. They didn't even look up. To them, I was just the janitor coming home to check the locks. I didn't take off my boots. I walked straight to the island and laid the first envelope in front of Jessica. Then, I walked over to the couch and dropped the second one right on Tyler's lap, sliding it over his controller. What's this? More drama? Jessica asked, not even looking at the paper yet. She took a sip of her Chardonnay, her face twisted in that familiar mask of boredom. It's a legal notice, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the anger they were used to. I suggest you both read it carefully, Tyler snorted, picking up the envelope with 2 fingers like it was a dirty napkin. Jude, if this is a bill for the heat, just give it to Jessica. I told you, I'm not. He stopped. He had pulled the document out. His eyes scanned the bolded header, notice to quit termination of tenancy. The silence that followed was heavy. I watched the color drain from Jessica's face as she read the words vacate the premises within 30 days. Gary, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is this? This isn't funny. Yeah, you were evicting me. Your own girlfriend. You're kidding, right? Tyler chimed in, though the arrogance in his voice was cracking. He tried to let out a dry laugh. You can't evict us, man. This is Sarah's, Jessica's house. She lives here. You can't just throw family out because of a thermostat. That's where you're wrong, Tyler, I said, leaning against the wall, crossing my arms. The deed says this is my house. The law says you are tenants. And as of 5 minutes ago, your tenancy is being terminated. You have 30 days to find a new place to set your rules. After that, the sheriff's department handles the rest. Jessica stood up, the iPad clattering to the floor. Over a fight. You're ending us over a stupid argument about the heat. No, Jessica. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm ending this because when your brother told me I was a guest in the home I pay for, you didn't blink. You didn't defend me. You chose your passenger. So now you get to ride with him. Somewhere else. The "you're kidding" face died right then and there. Tyler looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. For the first time in 4 months, he didn't have a comeback. The reality of the law had just crashed into his fantasy world, and the foundation was already gone. The atmosphere in the house shifted from high-voltage shock to a crawling, suffocating psychological siege. This was the part the lawyer warned me about. The interim period in construction. It's like waiting for the concrete to cure while people are trying to kick the forms apart. Jessica switched tactics within 48 hours. The rage vanished, replaced by a calculated, heart-wrenching softness. I'd come home to the scent of slow-roasted brisket, my favorite meal, and find old photos from our trip to the Finger Lakes scattered accidentally on the coffee table. She'd linger in the hallway, her eyes red-rimmed, wearing the oversized college hoodie of mine she knew I loved. Gary, please. She'd whisper as I walked past. We're more than a legal document. Don't let 4 months of stress erase 3 years of love. I made dinner. Can we just talk? No lawyers, just us. It was a surgical strike on my resolve. But then I'd look past her dot in the living room. Tyler was waging a different kind of war, the war of petty filth. He knew he couldn't hit me, and he knew he couldn't stay. So he decided to make my life a living hell on his way out. He'd leave raw chicken juice on the counters. He'd accidentally trip and spill a full glass of grape juice on the one rug he knew was an heirloom. He'd blast his speakers at 3:00 a.m., then claim he forgot I had an early shift. I didn't take the bait. Not once. I bought a pair of professional-grade noise-cancelling headphones, the kind we use on site for heavy drilling, and I wore them from the moment I stepped inside until I locked my bedroom door. I stopped eating anything she cooked. I bought a mini-fridge for my room and a lock for the door every morning. Before I left, I did a site inspection. I'd walk through the house with my phone, recording a 4,000 video of every room. March 12th, 6:00 a.m. Tyler has left the oven on again. Photo taken, documenting the new stain on the sectional. Time stamped. I was building a file. Every mess, every loud outburst, every accidental damage was sent straight to Marcus Dawn's office. Jessica's love act eventually cracked when she realized I wasn't eating the brisket. The mask slipped, revealing the same entitlement that had started this. You're a monster. She'd screamed through my closed door. You're treating us like criminals. I'd just adjust the volume on my headphones, watching the countdown on my calendar. 18 days left. 17 days left. I wasn't a boyfriend, and I wasn't a victim. I was a man waiting for the demolition permit to be finalized. With 12 days left on the clock, the Miller family pulled out the heavy artillery. I came home on a Tuesday to find a silver SUV in my driveway Jessica's parents had driven all the way from Pennsylvania. I walked into my living room to find an intervention. Jessica was sobbing on the armchair. Tyler was looking smugly at his phone, and her father, Jim Miller, was standing by the fireplace like he owned the air in the room. Her mother, Linda, just looked at me with that "I'm so disappointed in you" expression she usually reserved for slow waiters. "Gary, son," Jim started, using that paternal tone he thought still had power over me. "We think this has gone far enough. This legal nonsense. It's beneath you. Sarah Jessica told us everything. You've made your point. You're angry about the bills. We get it. Now, let's be adults. Tear up those papers and move past this." I didn't even put down my bag. "Jim, I stopped being son the moment your daughter told me I was a guest in my own house. This isn't a negotiation. It's a move-out schedule. You are putting my boy on the street." Linda cried out, clutching her chest. "Tyler has a condition. The job market is impossible. Have you no heart?" I looked at Tyler, 30 years old, able-bodied, currently wearing a $150 gaming headset, and then I looked back at Linda. "Tyler isn't a boy. Linda, he's a 30-year-old man who hasn't filled out a single job application in for months. And he's not on the street. He's in a house I pay for, using the electricity I pay for, eating the food I pay for. He's family." Jim barked, his face turning a deep shade of red. "Family helps each other. Family doesn't colonize your living room and tell you to follow their rules," I countered, my voice rising just enough to command the room. "Jim, if you're so concerned about his condition, your SUV is right outside. He can be packed in 20 minutes. You have a 4-bedroom house in the Poconos. Why hasn't he been living there?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jim's mouth opened, then shut. He knew why. Because Tyler was a nightmare to live with, and they'd finally managed to pawn him off on me. "I thought so," I said, walking toward the stairs. "In 12 days, Tyler becomes your responsibility again. Or he can find a studio apartment he can afford on a $0 a year salary. Either way, he's out of my colonial. This conversation is over. Please see yourselves out and take the bags of trash Tyler left in the kitchen with you." As they left, I heard Jim hiss something about me being a cold-hearted bastard. I just smiled. Being a bastard was significantly cheaper than being their benefactor. The countdown hit 0 on a crisp, bright Saturday morning. I didn't take any chances. At exactly 9 a.m., a Bergen County Sheriff's deputy pulled into my driveway. I'd arranged for a civil standby. I wanted a badge and a uniform to be the final punctuation mark on this chapter. The sight of that cruiser changed everything. The pathetic "we're not ready" excuses and the "just one more weekend please" evaporated instantly. Watching them throw their lives into trash bags and a rented U-Haul was a surreal, cinematic experience. It was like watching a fever break. Tyler was frantically dragging his gaming rig across the porch, his face a mask of sweaty, powerless rage. Jessica wouldn't even look at me. She was busy loading her designer bags into the backseat of her parents' SUV. Her shoulders slumped in the posture of someone who had finally run out of cards to play. As Tyler carried the last box of his graphic novels past me, he stopped. He leaned in, his breath smelling like the stale energy drinks he'd been hoarding, and spat out a final, bitter sneer. "You're gonna be real lonely in this big, empty house, Gary," he hissed. "I hope you enjoy talking to the walls. You've got no one now." The deputy, a veteran officer who had clearly seen 100 variations of this entitlement, didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Son," he said, his voice flat and dry as a bone, "I've seen a lot of guys in his position. Trust me, he's gonna sleep just fine." Tyler's face turned a brilliant shade of crimson before he scurried after the U-Haul. Jim and Linda Miller followed, their expressions grim as they realized their quiet retirement in the Poconos was about to be invaded by a 30-year-old toddler. Then, the miracle happened. The U-Haul pulled away. The SUV followed. The deputy gave me a sharp nod, got back in his cruiser, and drove off. I walked back inside and shut the door. The sound of the deadbolt clicking into place was the most satisfying thing I'd heard in half a year. I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. I spent the next 6 hours on a purification ritual. I didn't just clean. I stripped the house. I threw out the shower curtains, the stained rugs, and every single dish Tyler had touched. I called a junk removal service for the leather sectional. It was too colonized to keep. I opened every window, letting the biting March air flash out the stale scent of their presence, Finally, as the sun began to set, I walked over to the Nest thermostat. I dialed it down to a perfect, crisp 66 degrees. I sat on the floor of my empty living room with a single glass of expensive bourbon, listening to the absolute, glorious silence of my own home. The foundation was solid again. The guest was gone, and for the first time in 120 days, I was the only one making the rules. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments.